Heather Palacios. Good to see you all. What's everybody eating? Wraps? Are those wraps?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, don't get the snoozies, because sometimes when you eat lunch, you get the snoozies. I'm going to tell you guys my story, and welcome everybody online as well. I don't know where that online camera is, but somewhere. Okay. Well, hi to everybody. Oh, there. Hey guys. Hi guys. I'm going to tell you my story in 5 pictures, and then give you a little bit of application, and then we brought a gift for everybody, and then I'll probably just close with just a little sentiment for anybody that has lost somebody to suicide, because whenever I go and speak, there's always that person in the room, and I want to be sensitive to that as well. So they gave me a clicker. I'm so excited. I never get trusted with a clicker. Let's start off with this photo right here. This is in 1981, and I was living in Bowling Green, Ohio, and I sat down in my bedroom with my little butterfly stationery, and I wrote what would today be categorized as a suicide letter, and I mailed it to my grandma and grandpa expressing my wishes to not want to live anymore. And my mom and dad back then, this was back in the 80s, there wasn't a lot of agendas and movements and coalitions for suicide prevention. So my mom and dad did the best that they could. They called the local church, and a deacon of the church, Mike Lyon, came over to our home and he prayed with me in our living room. And I just cried a lot. But then we just kind of moved on from that event. Now now FYI, the pictures go all downhill from here, okay? They only get worse. Like here, I'm totally cute, rocking that Princess Diana wannabe feather haircut. But, okay. Well, here I am still trying to rock that Princess Diana haircut with about a can of Aquanet and the pinstripes and the shoulder pads, which were so trending back then. But here I'm 14 years old, and at this age, my parents made the move from Ohio to Chicago. This happens all the time. If you live in Florida, most of us are not originally from Florida. We're transplants. Well, my mom and dad transplanted to Chicago. And in that transition, I was very upset. I couldn't handle the move. I didn't want to start over. I didn't have any friends anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And so before the new school year would start in our new school in Chicago, I sat down and I penned a 6-page suicide letter, and I put it on the kitchen counter, and I went to put my plan in motion when the doorbell rang. Now, I cannot make this stuff up. I've told this story for 23 years now. Who was at the door? I wish I could say like an angel. No, not if your name's Heather Michelle Funk Palacios. It was the Orkin bug man. And he needed to come in and spray for bugs. And, I look back now and I kind of see that as a divine interruption because of his needing to get into the home. I wasn't able to go and do what I was planning on doing. Interesting factoid, during the pandemic, when we were all bored looking for things to do, I'm sure you guys were all baking home goods. I do not bake. So I was cleaning out some bins in the garage, and I came across that suicide letter from that 14-year-old girl right there, and I found it. I haven't been able to read it, but I do have it, and it's just a bittersweet reminder to me of a lot of things. Moved on from that event to, okay, told you they get worse. This is in 1995. This is what I like to call my albino cowboy phase. I have no idea what was going on here. A lot of at-home hair coloring, because that is not my natural hair color right there. But in 1995, I had been dating a guy, guys, girls, yada, yada, yada. And he was kind of stringing me along, and, this happens. These are just things that happen in life, just hiccups that happen. But for somebody like myself, it was very derailing that he wouldn't put a ring on it. And in all seriousness, I really could not handle it. And this time I would, at this age, attempt to take my life with a bottle of pills, and was taken to the emergency room where they were able to do what they needed to do to keep me going. And now we have, this is my husband, a long time ago. So this is in the year 2000. And we got married February 6th, 1999. So we were on our 1-year wedding anniversary. Now my husband's a pastor at a church out west, Church by the Glades. And I know I don't look like pastor wife material, but I just like to be full of surprises, you know? So, yes, I did marry a pastor, and on our 1-year anniversary, I know you're judging me right now, and you're like, oh, really, pastor? Well, why are you at a gambling table? Well, obviously, we were casting out the iniquities of the sins in that establishment. Okay, anyway, moving on. Not long after we returned from our 1-year wedding anniversary, I just woke up on July 30th and could not reconcile being a pastor's wife and perpetually wanting to die by suicide. Up to this point, it had just been something I had battled all my life, and it was not going anywhere. But that's not normal behavior for a pastor's wife, and divorce wasn't an option because he's a pastor. So very sadly and regretfully, on July 30th, 2000, I would make the decision to take my life in a public parking lot. I don't give all the details of it, but I will say to you that it was not a good scene. My husband showed up and tried to stop me from what I was doing, and he was unsuccessful. He had to call 911. 911 first responders showed up. There's about 6 of them, and all 6 of them were unable to stop me. In this particular case of wanting to take my life, I had become unusually strong and combative and belligerent, and the first responders were unsuccessful. They could not stop me either. So they had to tranquilize me and knock me out, and they took me to the hospital where they treated my injuries, and I didn't know this, but Florida has a little act that they call the Baker Act. Some of you might be familiar with that. What that essentially is that if you're a threat to yourself or society, the state is allowed to step in and say, for your safety and others, we're going to detain you in a psychiatric ward for a 72-hour hold until you are released by a state-appointed psychologist. There's a lot of pushback with that. I mean, I've been speaking for years and years and years, and I even speak to patients in psychiatric wards, and I know there's pushback with that because it's my right, and you don't have the right to take my rights away. I don't get caught up in all that stuff. That's not the lane God's called me to. My lane is to help people not die by suicide. I will say for myself, I needed to be locked up. Had they not, I would have tried harder the next day. This time I was very determined to not live anymore, and so they put me where I needed to be. And I lied there that night, and I remember it like it was yesterday, July 30th, 2000, locked in a psychiatric ward. You know, I was very soiled. They had not allowed me to shower. They put me in a room by myself and locked me in lest I be around somebody else and harm them the way I had been kind of fighting off the first responders. And when they locked me in, it was the lowest point of my life. I mean, I was a pastor's wife in a psych ward who couldn't even succeed at taking her life. And I just thought that night, I will never be able to come back from this. How do you ever put back the pieces? And who will let you? Who will accept you, even if you do make a comeback? And I was just so mad at God. Now, I'm a person of faith. I'm not here to push my faith on anybody, but it is part of my story. So I will say that I was very upset with God that night. I had been trying almost all my life to not be here. And yet I kept being here. And I didn't want to be. And I was very mad. And I just remember praying that night. And, you know, I don't know if you can make deals with God, but I think he gives concessions to cuckoo people like me, because I was like, God, I can't win, you know? And I said, look, okay, fine. If you can get me out of here, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to help people not end up here. And that deal is still manifesting 22 years later. I have not gone back to the psychiatric ward, and God has helped me help others not end up there. And so that's a good place to clap. Okay, so that's that. So let's go to now, this is my family. Same husband, he stuck with me. But I know, that is not a cardboard cutout. He's still with me. And that's our 2 boys. This was in 2020 during the pandemic. And I just want to talk about the pandemic for a minute because, you know, I went from 2000 to 2020 without major urgent episodes. I have battled suicide since I was 8. As recently, the last couple of months, just with some stuff I've been going through. It's just we all struggle with something. And I will concede to you that mine's a little more unique. But it doesn't make me not human. I mean, we all struggle with something. Mine just happens to be the suicidal ideation. But 2020 was very interesting. How many of you guys online and here would, by show of hands, say it was the best year ever? Right? Terrible. Terrible. Well, after 2000, I got very serious about what I identified as a battle. And I've worked very hard for the last 20 years with something that I just kind of call my mixology. I go to church, I journal, I exercise, I get counseling, I take medication, I know my boundaries, and I know my worth. And that has worked for the last 22 years, so I'm sticking with it. But when 2020 rolled in, it threw a loop at me that I had never had to struggle with before, and that was a pandemic shutdown. For anybody that knows anybody that struggles with mental health, isolation is not good. But we were forced to isolate. Now by 2020, I have been going around with my organization speaking about not giving up and helping people from prisons to psychiatric wards to businesses like yourselves, to colleges, to schools, to halfway houses. I speak anywhere because suicide is pervasive. And so anytime I get asked, I say yes. I don't turn anything down. But all of that came to a stop, a screeching halt, when the pandemic set in and we shut everything down. For the foreseeable future, I had no event to go to and nowhere to be, and I had nothing to do. And on one day in the spring during 2020, I made the mistake of allowing myself to be isolated without my family around me. And they were out of town. I woke up that day, it was raining, I looked at my calendar, I had nothing to do, and I just started to, entertain bad thoughts. And they're not thoughts that I had ever entertained before, and one of them was that, have you ever thought about how much of an embarrassment you are to your husband? He's this dignified executive pastor with a MBA from University of Miami, and you're very different. You're weird. And sure, you could take your life today, and he would be sad, but he could move on maybe to somebody a little more normal. And the thought didn't stop there. It evolved into one more thought. Have you ever thought of how embarrassing you are as a mom? And I hadn't thought about that. At this point, I had 2 teenage boys. And I started to entertain the thought of how embarrassing it must be to have me as their mom. I'm not a normal mom. I'm a weird mom. And those thoughts just kept ruminating in my mind, and I bought into them. So I made a plan that day. I powered off my phone, and I started to put that plan in motion, and I cried out to God to help me. And it was weird because while those suppositions were spinning in my head, I started to get a gut feeling in my gut. And I share that because I just think it's really important that we all know how much God loves us. He didn't take his hands off my circumstances that day because he couldn't get through to me through my mind. I started to get a gut feeling. We all get gut feelings. It's whether or not we want to listen to them. And my gut feeling was very clear that day. Heather, you got to practice what you preach. 4 words. Practice what you preach. I just kept feeling that in my gut. My mind was saying, give up. And my gut was saying, practice what you preach. Because whether I speak to one homeless opioid addict on the street or a room full of illustrious, successful career winners like you guys or anybody in between, my message is the same. when you are in a crisis where you want to give up, you need to call someone. And I know that's very trite and it's almost dummy down that I say call someone. But you have to keep it simple when you are dealing with life or death in your mind. And so I always say the same message, call someone. And I thought, practice what you preach means, Heather, right now, you need to practice what you preach. You need to call somebody. And my gut was right. I did. I went out of the garage, I went back into my house, I powered up the phone, and I called a hotline for pastors in crisis. And I got a voicemail. Can't make this stuff up. They had COVID hours. What? So I left this long, crazy lady message, like really crazy lady message. Oprah ugly cry, stuttering, rambling, blah, blah. Then, you hit pound to send. Hit pound to send and hung up, and I was like, oh my gosh, what'd I just do? They're gonna hear that on Monday, they're gonna be like, who is this crazy lady? So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna power up my laptop, I'm gonna take the dogs out, because they gotta go potty now, and I'm just gonna send them a more normal email, just to kind of circle back around to that crazy voicemail they're gonna hear.
Sorry, I had indigestion.
Yeah, so I found their email address for this hotline for pastors in crisis, and I was like, dear sir or madam, you may receive a voicemail from a little bit of a, crises type version of myself. Rest assured, everything is great. I hope you have a great day. God bless you. Kind of an email like you guys would send, a nice normal email, kind of smooth the edges over that voicemail I had left them. And as I think back on that day, after I sent the email, my husband and boys came home, and they came inside, and Andy was starving, and my husband had needed help unpacking, and I had a headache, and I do believe that God can answer in miracles. I've read the Bible. I've read it. I know there's miracles in the Bible. God can answer in the miracles. But I also want to represent that God can help us in the mundane. Look, he didn't send like a figment of the Savior in my cinnamon toast that day. I didn't have the Shekinah Glory Choir descend into the garage where I was, though he could have. No, it was really just a gut feeling and one little to-do after another. But it worked. And so I've learned to broaden my scope of God. That he is big and mighty and powerful and miraculous. But he's also with seemingly small people in garages doing mundane things as well, as extensions of his love. I got some help after that event, kind of put myself back together. And it was in the fall of 2020 where, Julie, who's here, Julie and I, we're like collaborating on, when I go and visit people that are struggling, I go to homes, I go to psychiatric wards, I go to hospitals when they've overdosed or attempted suicide, I go to halfway houses. When I go and visit people, I always bring to them a collection of things that I've needed to sustain myself for the last 41 years, since I was 8. But due to the pandemic and the shutdown, I wasn't able to do those visitations, and it was very difficult for me because I still wanted to get these things to them that I've used my whole life. And so Julie and I, and then soon Claudia, and this is our new volunteer, wave hi, let me know who you are, okay. So Julie, Claudia, and I, out of my dining room, started to box and ship what I would normally deliver in person, because I had people reaching out to me left and right during the pandemic. Let me give you 1 week's worth of email traffic. This is 1 week during a pandemic of what was coming my way. Heather, I just found my husband in the garage after attempting suicide. Heather, my girlfriend is contemplating suicide. I need help. Heather, a student attempted suicide in our church's bathroom. Heather, my son's on a 10-day binge. Heather, my coworker's wife died by an overdose. Heather, do you know a rehab for my 16-year-old? Heather, my son's using cocaine with alcohol. Can I get him admitted without getting him arrested? Heather, can you pray for our 13-year-old? She's in the hospital for a suicide attempt. Heather, my mom died of COVID and my sister just took her life. That was in 1 week. And so there was this huge medical crisis happening in our country that was very well known. But in my little corner of the world, there was also a huge mental crisis. And I was hearing about it daily. So I wanted to do something. And so that's where Julie and Claudia came in, and we started to box and ship what I would normally take in a visit, and it became known as a life box. And so this is a life box, and it contains what I call essentials and extras. It has a Bible journal pen. And a Bible journal pen are the 3 things I've had since I was 8. I have my 8-year-old Bible, and I have my 8-year-old journal. And my journal for my 8-year-old Heather shows a girl that was very sad. And I have my journal, my Bible, up to today, and all the Bibles and journals in between. So every life box includes a Bible journal pen. What people do with that, that's not my business. But in addition to that, all the extras in the life box include things that would make that particular person know they're awesome. If it's a person in addiction recovery, we put things in there for that. If it's a person in the military, we put things in there for that. If it's a mom, we put things in there for a mom, a child. We've done life boxes for people as young as 6. We know a 6-year-old that tried to take his life. We've done them as old as 83. There was a woman who didn't want to live anymore because her husband had passed. And every kind of situation in between. We started shipping them out of my dining room. And in 2 years, we started doing this in the fall of 2020. So it's now December of 2022. But in 2 years, we've done 6,973 life boxes. What? What? It's actually a little bit more than that. I think it's up to like 7,050 now. That's a lot of life boxes. I wanted to just share with you guys some of the people that have requested life boxes. We had a pastor in South Africa reach out and say he didn't want to live anymore. We sent him one. And it took a long time to get there, but it got there. And he let us know that he received it. And it wasn't for me personally that he received it. I don't need the pat on the backs. It was that he was alive to let me know he received it. We sent a life box to a young boy whose mother was planning the murder of him and the suicide of herself. The authorities took her away, and we sent him a life box. We did a life box for an addict in recovery. She had fallen off the wagon. She's become a good friend of mine. She's Jewish, and I'm Christian. She's in a homosexual relationship. I'm in a heterosexual relationship. She's an addict. I'm not an addict. We have nothing in common except that we both have struggled to live. And not only did she request a life box and get one from us, but now she reaches out to us to give them to the addicts that she runs into on the streets, and has created kind of a partnership with us. And again, I don't celebrate that she's getting more boxes from us. I celebrate that she's alive and God's using her. We sent 2 military bases life boxes. One before was heading out to Eastern Europe last Christmas. We went to Uvalde this year, right after the school shooting. We drove, I didn't, I flew, but my very awesome team drove from Fort Lauderdale to Uvalde, Texas. How many hours was that?
A lot.
Yeah, too many.
24
See,
hours.
yeah, I'm triggering them right now. They're like, don't make us remember that. They offered to drive. I didn't tell them to. They offered, just for my defense. I don't want them to think I'm a mean boss. But the school board partnered with us. The Uvalde School Board partnered with us, and we ended up creating a drive-through at the convention center in downtown Uvalde, where we ran out of life boxes and ended up giving a total of 717 life boxes to that community. This year we've gone to high schools and I mean, I can't even think of all the places we've gone, but wherever we go, I share my story and we give life boxes to people. Because here's the thing, is you and me might not need a life box, but we might know somebody who does. And I want to set people up, I want to equip people. Suicide's a very weird topic. Listen, it makes my husband uncomfortable. He doesn't even know what to do with it. And so I understand that, because I live with someone that and he's Cuban. I mean, so, and so he's very astute and, proper and nothing like me, trust me. But it's even uncomfortable for him, but he understands that he, as a leader, could come across somebody, and we don't always know what to do with people when they're in that kind of a harm. And so I just try to put life boxes in everybody's hands. And so we brought a life box for every one of you guys today. And if you need it, I hope you receive it. I hope it encourages you. And if you don't need it, I hope that you receive it and keep it and give it to somebody that's having a tough time. Suicide happens anywhere for anything to anybody. But one more suicide's one too many for me. And I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to just one more not happening. Because I know what it's like to want to die. But I know what it's like to get to live. And I just want that for everybody. And it's a hard business, Kim. It's a hard business because 7,050 life boxes is very heartbreaking, and I've read all the reasons. But I feel like this is my mission, and I gotta keep going. And I have an awesome team that stands with me and helps me do it as well. And even Casey's daughter has gotten in on helping us. We put a personal handwritten card in every life box. And her daughter's been helping us write those cards. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it because I've been telling it for 22 years now, so I kind of gotta stick with it. But I would be remiss if I did not just take a moment and pause and pray for anybody that has lost somebody to suicide, or is just going through a tough time. If you got, is that okay? I mean, if anybody is like, raises their hand subtly and says, please don't pray, I totally won't. But if you, that's okay. Thank you. God, I thank you for these awesome people here today, that they allowed me to come here and share my story. Lord, I just want to pray for two groups of people right now. First, I want to pray for anybody that's struggling in their mind. It's the invisible crisis. Nobody can know how hard it is on the inside of us except for us and you. And so I pray, since you are aware, that you would reach down to where this person is, into their atmosphere, and let them know that you are here with them, and let them know that they can make it with you, and they don't need to give up. They just need to make it 1 hour at a time. Sustain them, God. Help them like only you can. Lord, I also want to pray for anybody that has lost somebody to suicide. That is a tragedy upon tragedies, and it leaves people in a wake of broken pieces. I just pray that you would surround them with comfort that is tangible and intangible, that is felt, that is seen, that is heard when they need it the most. And as you hold the broken pieces of their heart and assemble it back together over time, I pray you would hold them. Thank you for the Horners and for them believing in me and letting me come today. Bless this business. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. My team is going to pass out life boxes to you guys right now as well. Thank you, team.
Hang on 1 second.
On behalf of all of us, Heather, thank you for your bravery in telling the story. I have done it. And one of the questions that I know people are thinking is, how can they get a hold of you? You're wonderful. And how can, what are the resources you can have? We brought some printouts today, by the way, that you can have. And I know Diane has something saying, people need to know how to get a hold of you for that person that does need that life box.
Great question. So just go to our website, wonderful.com. Let me see. It would be amazing if that was here. And it's not. Okay. Oh, it was? Yes. Thank you. What would I do without you guys? There it is. Just go to the website. You don't have to say anything. You can request a life box to be sent to anybody, anywhere, for anything, and they're free. They're shipped for free anywhere in the world. Our website has a ton of resources for families, for kids, for employees, for employers, for leaders, for followers, for children. You just gotta click on the resources tab.
And are you open to having any questions?
Yeah.
Okay. If anybody virtually, Edison, anybody have a question here? Okay, we'll give you the mic.
Thanks for sharing. I appreciate your faith, and I really want to make them appreciate your vulnerability. I too am a survivor, and I work in an industry that is plagued with suicide
Hmm.
and construction.
Yes, yeah,
It's staggering.
it's the number one occupation right now for suicide is construction and contractors.
So 2023, the focus of the foundation I represent is to make a difference in suicide. But my question specifically is, how can we partner with you and create a box specific to the industry?
I like
That is the best question ever. So Ohio has a lot of construction workers and they had an event to raise awareness and they asked me to go. And we created 200 construction life boxes and took them to Ohio and ran out. So just let us know. We'll give you our card. Our construction boxes, they're so cool. But they're specifically curated with the resources that construction and contractors need. But they also have things in there that are fun for the guys. We'd be happy to help.
Thank you, Amy. Maybe the guests, we have some guests here, by the way, from other companies. But we thought this message was so powerful, so some of our friends in different industries are here. with us today. Does anybody else have a question in the room? How about online? Edison, do you have anybody online asking a question?
No questions online.
Okay, I think people are still kind of numb, having a shock, a
Yeah,
little teary eyed.
yeah.
Oh,
It's okay.
that's okay. We get it.
Yeah, that's okay.
My friend Joy.
Thank you, Heather.
Mhm.
My question is there anything being done that you're aware of in South Florida for all the kids? Like the really young elementary kids of the pandemic, like that had that like really tumultuous couple of years and break. And I know I'm hearing so much about the rise in anxiety around with kids and my own daughter is definitely one.
Right.
So just was wondering, is there anything that we can do or that you're aware of, for children?
Mhm. So, NAMI is a mental health organization. Broward County has its own NAMI extension, and the United Way has partnered with NAMI as well. And they are, 211 Broward is a great resource. And make sure we all know the suicide hotline. It's 988. And it's an easy 3-digit number that you can text or call, 988. And I give that number a lot. The reason I do is because it is 24/7 of trained experts that will talk to anyone, children included. And it's anonymous. It's anonymous. So I mean, I know there's caveats when it's children and stuff, but this is just a great resource to have when you don't know what else to do, especially if you don't know that person well. Recently in Broward County, there was a student that jumped off of the building and took his life. We went to that event where they were raising awareness. Unfortunately, we don't want to raise awareness after the fact. The fact we need to be raising awareness before the fact, something like that happens. But we were able to distribute life boxes to everybody that was there that day, student life boxes. But just generally speaking, for any parents, the first thing I would say is believe your kid. My gosh, my mom and dad, I give them credit because I was 8 when I wanted to take my life and there was no resources, but they did something. They called the local church. They did something. And I sadly and very tragically, and my team will tell you this, what hurts us the most is when parents don't believe their kids. Because I've done the funerals for those kids. Kids are immature in their minds. And we might say, you're doing it for attention. You're just doing it because you want to get your way. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it manifests. the fact is they're crying out because on the inside, they're really hurting. And so the first thing I would say is trust your child when they come to you with that information, or your grandchild. Number two is I would say get them into a therapist. If I can help with that, I know children therapists in the area. But those would be the first two initial steps, I would say. Just make sure you keep 988 in your phone. Just like we have 911, we all should have 988. Yeah, Julie.
Can I talk a little bit to
Yeah.
that? Oh, I don't need
Well,
that.
I'm sorry.
I'm a mom of a person who has attempted suicide. So if you hear your kids talking about my friend said, you have to believe that. Had my daughter not put it out on social media and somebody she knew looked into it and contacted actually Heather, which we found out long after we started doing this together, she would not have been alive in the morning.
Right.
She was in her room. We didn't know teenagers are always in their room.
Right.
So she would have gone to bed that night and not woken up.
Right. Right.
So the police are amazing. They can track it by phone number. They can hunt it out through social media. They'll go a friend of a friend of a friend. They will find your child
Yeah.
or your child's friend.
That's good.
So it's so important to not just, oh my gosh, that's horrible. I'm sure she'll be fine. Because that's what I would have done
Right.
if my daughter told me that about somebody else.
Great question.
So
That's good, Julie. Great. Thank you for your question. Great question.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What sort of signs do you look for if a person is not vocal about it?
Right.
Leo, I'm coming forward so you can ask that same question. I think that's good on him. Oh, you have a feel like right there. Yeah.
What sort of signs do you look for in a person who's not vocal?
Right.
About the struggle?
Right, so there are classic signs, and yet at the same time, I will meet with families who've lost someone to suicide and they'll say they had none of those signs. That's why I'm really out here doing this, is because there are signs that the experts will put out there, but that isn't always the case. To your point, though, some signs that we can look for in people is change in behavior. So the gregarious life of the party becomes withdrawn and quiet, or the reserved quiet almost becomes very life of the party and gregarious. Extreme changes in behavior, giving away of things. If somebody comes to work and they want to, you've just been a good friend, I want to give you this family heirloom. And you've known that maybe they didn't get a promotion, or you just know a little more intel. Giving away things is another one. And substance abuse is another one. They've never struggled before with substance abuse, but now they are. Well, that's because they're trying to escape something. Something hurts on the inside. That's another sign. And those would be the main ones. But again, for any reason, people can do this. So great question. I have on my website a resource of signs you can look for that you're free to download and receive. Any other questions? Great questions. Thank you for asking.
Anyone else? I'm texting Diane over and thinking she's gonna be over there having a question. Okay, Mary Beth?
Mary Beth, that's my friend.
Yeah, I'm kind of my friend first.
That's my friend.
So this isn't so much of a question, but other than I've known Heather for a couple of years and I know her boys really well, PJ and Andy. And Heather, I just want you to know that if the enemy ever puts that message in your mind that I'm not a good mom, or I'm an embarrassing mom, or an embarrassing wife, you need to hear these words that I'm telling you. And sometimes when you hear them from your kids and your husband, you think they have to say that, right? They're going to say that to me. That's my husband, that's my children. Your kids love you so much, and they adore you, and I've heard it for the years, being in their presence, and they're an amazing young man that you have raised. So please don't ever let the enemy tell you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So quickly, I just said also that so many of us, have family members, friends that are touched by mental illness, and sometimes we don't take them seriously, and, we have to.
Yeah.
And we can get help for those people. who
Yeah.
suffer from
Oh, yeah.
depression and anxiety, because depression leads to suicide in these cases.
Mhm.
People just don't randomly decide to do this on a whim. If people suffering from mental
Right.
illness, so.
Right.
We all need to listen to that.
And then I'll just give one more sweeping, really important statement for everybody in any case. There is a falsehood out there that if you ask that person, that it'll put the thought in their head. That is diametrically false. My husband, over the years, has come home and said, Heather, are you thinking about killing yourself? Heather, are you thinking about harming yourself? And I can tell you, as somebody that has had to have that question asked to me, it does not make me want to do it even more. It shows me this person cares, and it makes me want to do it less. Never be afraid, never shy away. And when I've done all the training on this, they have trained me to say to the person, are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about harming yourself? That way it's not misunderstood or it's not open to translation. It is the direct question, and it shows and speaks a ton of care and love.
What's the first thing you do when they say yes?
The first thing you do when they say yes is, let's call 988 together. And you put it on your phone. But the first thing we do is we call 988. If they are in the motion of acting on that, so if they are getting ready, if they have the pills there, they have the gun, I mean, then you call 911. But if they say, yes, I am, then listen, I love you. And we're gonna call 988 together right now. And I try to put this out because I don't want anybody to think that it's complicated. You know, and so my husband and I have these 22 years of living this out. And so we can speak to that it doesn't have to be complicated. And I'm thankful for that. Great question. Thank you.
Let's call 988 together.
Yeah.
We're gonna remember that, right?
Yeah.
guys?
Yeah.
The St. Pete team just wanted to say thank you and they appreciate them.
Aw, thank you, St. Petersburg.
Any other questions? So we'll let you, say goodbye, and Heather, thank you so much.
Thank
for all
you.
of us.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
Thank you.